Hi, this is Pam Henley with the Montana State Library. Thanks for joining our website chat today. We have, along with Jenny, the State Librarian, we're going to have updates from John Finn and Matt Beckstrom. So I'll just turn it over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Pam, and thanks for everybody for joining me. I'm going to start things off today talking a little bit about the most recent State Library Commission meeting, share some updates with you from there. I want to talk to you a little bit about some legislation and federal funding issues / opportunities with our Library Services Technology Act funds. As Pam said, we have Matt Beckstrom and John Finn representing MLA Government Affairs and the ALA chapter to talk about some updates. And then I want to talk at the end a little bit more about our public awareness campaign. So to start things off, as I like to do with these website chats in the week following our commission meeting, I just want to share a couple of brief updates from that commission meeting. Of course, we're heading into the legislative session, and so we spent quite a bit of time talking about legislative priorities. We had representatives from the Montana Library Association as well as representatives from the governor's office there talking about legislative priorities. There's a couple of things to be watching for in the upcoming legislative session. First and foremost, for the state library, our top budget priority will be to try to restore some of the funding that's tied to some of the positions that we had to let go when we faced budget cuts last fiscal year as a result of the 2017 session. I'm very grateful that the governor's budget does include funding that would allow us to restore most of those positions, and so we're really focused on keeping that FTE throughout the coming session. That will be our top priority. Of course, we'll be watching other pieces of legislation as they work their way through the process. Right now, we're not anticipating anything that would directly affect our budget or libraries, but we will be ever watchful. There's well over 2,500, I think over 2,600 now bill draft requests out there, and they can still come in for several more weeks. So I fully anticipate that we're going to top 3,000 bill draft requests this session. So we're watching for those. And again, our top priority is trying to ensure that our budget includes funding that would allow us to restore most of the staff that we lost. Other legislative priorities from the governor's office that you might be interested in, their budget does include funding for ongoing expanded Medicaid. And then they are also proposing legislation that would continue and expand funding for registered preschools around the state. Those would be preschools either offered by school districts to encourage school districts to start some pre-K programs, as well as to both public and private preschool providers. This would be a grant program that they could apply for funds for. And of course, given our focus on early literacy and work with those kinds of preschool and early childhood providers, it's something that we keep an eye on. And then secondly, the governor is proposing an infrastructure bill that's a mix of cash and bonding, and included in that bill will be funding for rural local governments to apply for funds to help expand access to broadband in their communities. And of course, we're very interested and concerned that libraries have access to adequate and affordable broadband. And so that's something that we'll be monitoring and advocating for as it works its way through the session. So those are the highlights as we know them. There's a couple of watch bills out there from some of our library champions that are just hanging out there in case legislators need to take action to defend libraries in any kind of way. But that's sort of the status of the session as I know it. The session, of course, starts January 7th. And we will have the State Library's budget hearing on February 5th. That date is tentative for the budget hearing, but it's likely to hold. And then also scheduled that day is Library Legislative Day and our Library Legislative Night event hosted here at the State Library. And I know we'll be talking about that a little bit more later on in the website chat. A couple of other things I wanted to bring to your attention based on action from the State Library Commission. One was a recommendation that came out of the Montana Shared Catalog Staff and Executive Committee to freeze the application process for 2019. Typically in January, the Shared Catalog staff would open up an application process for libraries to apply to join the Shared Catalog. And then based on the amount of LSTA funds we have to help with some of those startup costs and action by the Commission in April, those applications are approved. We're in a position right now where, staff are feeling a little bit just overworked given the number of libraries that we have. We're bringing on some new libraries right now into the shared catalog, and in particular, staff are working hard to support school libraries. We're really working hard to try to find some funding solutions that would allow us to hire potentially one more staff person for the shared catalog. And so we're going to, as I said, freeze the application process for 2019 while we try to resolve that staffing concern. And then ideally open up the application process a year from now for new libraries to continue to join the shared catalog. So just a heads up in case you were thinking about applying this year, we may have to delay that for one more year. And then the other thing from their action that I wanted to bring to your attention was adoption of new rules related to the state's depository library program. You all know that the state library is responsible for providing permanent public access to state government publications. And those are defined in law as any information produced by a state agency that's intended for public distribution. For many, many years now, we have been in the process of collecting that information in electronic form rather than in print form. So that dramatically changed the process for a library to be a depository library. Historically, of course, libraries received boxes of print state publications from the state library. They were cataloged, they were processed, they were put on your shelves. They may be circulated, they maybe didn't, they had to be weeded and so forth. But in today's digital world, we don't really have those processes at all anymore. We've digitized our historic collection of state publication. There's about 27,000 state publications now available online. And we know that agencies are essentially publishing their state publications by posting them largely as PDF documents to state agency websites. And so for about a decade now, we have been crawling and archiving state agency websites as the primary means of capturing new state publications. Because laws still exist that mandate that we do provide permanent public access to state publications and that there is a depository program, we also have to have in place administrative rules that describe how that depository program is administered. And so we modernize those rules to reflect the fact that these publications really are in digital form. We're really, through this effort, encouraging any library in the state to think of themselves as what we're referring to as a government information center. And I'm just going to bring up this rule so you have an idea of what it looks like, if I could actually bring it up properly here. Oh, no. So there's descriptions in here about what the state library does. There's descriptions in here about what state agencies need to do. Again, it's largely that they need to ensure that their state publications are posted to publicly accessible websites so we have a chance to capture them. And then there's these rules for depository libraries. And again, we want every library to think of themselves as a depository library or a government information center. And largely what that means for a library is that through your website you provide online access to the archived websites and the digital state publications that exist out at the Internet Archive that we provide through the state library. If you're a member of the Montana Shared Catalog, these state publications are already cataloged with links to the digital equivalencies at the Internet Archive. So there's not a lot of actual labor involved from a library perspective to really be a government information center. We will offer and will encourage libraries to take training on how to access these repositories of electronic government information, and we hope that libraries will take advantage of that. We're also exploring options of how we at the State Library might help capture local government information in similar ways by capturing local government websites and archiving those, and then helping libraries make sure that those archived websites are available through your websites. So this is something that we're going to be talking a lot more about at the State Library through Jim Kammerer, our state government publications librarian, as well as through our lifelong learning program. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions and just...
I haven't seen any questions come in, but people can put them in the chat, or a lot of people have microphones, so if you want to just use your microphone, go ahead and jump in with a question. But no, I don't see any now.
Okay. And again, the links to these documents are all found right through the State Library website, msl.mt.gov, if you just go to the Commission section. And as you can see, all of the documentation pertaining to the Commission's discussion and action are just linked right from the agenda there. I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about some action pertaining to the IMLS, Institute of Museum and Library Services, and our Library Services Technology Act funds. I announced, it was probably at the late October website chat, that Congress had in fact passed the budget that contains IMLS funding. So the sort of dickering in DC aside, that funding is set. We haven't yet received our official award notification from IMLS about the exact dollar amount that we should receive. We were hoping to receive that information this month. We got notice from IMLS yesterday that official award probably is now going to be delayed until early January. But regardless, this is far earlier than we typically receive this notice. So that's great news from a planning perspective for us. We do think it's going to be slightly higher than it's been in previous years, not by a whole lot, but just a little bit more, and certainly not lower than we've seen. So that's all really good news. Some frustrating news that you may have seen recently in the past day or two via social media is the fact that the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, has declined to take the reauthorization of the Museum and Library Services Act to the House floor. The authorization for IMLS expired in 2016. And what that means, it doesn't have a lot of legal bearing. The agency still exists. It can still be funded. It can still carry forward with all of their legal functions. But having that congressional authorization is like a little reminder or trigger to Congress that this is in fact something that Congress believes should be funded. And the fact that it hasn't been reauthorized is just a little bit of a red flag out there. The Senate unanimously passed the reauthorization of the Museum and Library Services Act a couple of weeks ago, and so passed it on to the House for action. And included in that reauthorization was some language that, if funded in the future, could actually provide a pretty nice increase in the funds that states receive. Unfortunately, as of the last time I checked social media, the Speaker is still declining to allow that bill to come to the floor for a House vote. So you might be seeing some action on social media encouraging people to reach out to their congressional delegation, encouraging the Speaker to allow that bill to come for a vote. If it doesn't get passed, again, it does not mean that we will not be funded. It doesn't impact our budget, but it does mean that the whole reauthorization process then has to start over from scratch. It doesn't pick up where it left off. It literally has to go all the way back to bill drafting and all the way back to committee action and start over from the very beginning. So that would certainly be frustrating and discouraging. I see Anne saying that she's called Gianforte's office, and I've certainly contacted our representative as well.
Before you move on, I just want to bring up Nancy's question about the depository libraries. She asked about, you had mentioned that libraries will receive training, and she just wondered when and how would that be taking place.
I'm sure it'll be through webinars. We don't have anything scheduled yet with Joe Flick, but that's something that's on our to-do list. So look for more information from Joe. Great question, Nancy. And I know that Matt is going to be talking about this next topic in just a little bit, also as it pertains to our IMLS and grants to state funding. I wanted to make you aware of an initiative that's coming out of the chief officers of state library agencies. That's the Professional Association for State Librarians. We are calling on states to support a funding request to Congress that would increase the amount of grants to states funds, which is our LSTA funds we receive, to the equivalent of $1 per capita in the U.S. Right now, grants to states program, you've heard me say, is totals about $160 million. And we will be calling on Congress to increase that funding to approximately $325 million. So essentially doubling the amount of funding that's available. Montana actually receives a little bit more than $1 per capita right now, based on the formula of how those funds are distributed. It doesn't necessarily mean we would only be limited to receiving that $1 per capita. There would be essentially a doubling of the amount of funds that are available, and then based on the formula for distributing those funds to states, the state library would see a pretty substantial increase in the amount of funds that we receive that we then use to fund all of the library development efforts and resource sharing efforts that we coordinate here at the state library. So I just wanted to share this map with you. This is a map that I am maintaining for COSLA, the chief officers, that shows the states that thus far have adopted resolutions in support of COSLA's effort. And in the coming months, we're going to be working as an association trying to encourage the American Library Association to consider this action and to also support this kind of initiative. I know that for that association, that's a fairly heavy lift. They have supported level funding for the Grants to States program for many, many years. And so changing that approach to that kind of funding from level funding to doubling the funding is a pretty substantial change in that platform. But it's something that we are certainly encouraging at COSLA, and I have been talking to our Government Affairs Committee about passing a resolution to endorse as well. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to John and Matt to talk a little bit more about MLA and Government Affairs.
Thanks, Jenny. Real quick, before we get too much of the government affairs, maybe I'll talk briefly about the process that we'll be taking for the resolution that you just mentioned. Excuse me. I think the next logical step for this would be for me to work with you to write up a quick resolution, assuming that the association wants to move forward with it, which I think they do, and then I can bring it to the next website chat meeting in January. I suppose we could do it in January or February, and distribute it and have a general discussion from the membership about ways to proceed with that. And hopefully the goal would be to take it to the conference membership meeting in April here in Helena for a vote. Does that sound about right?
Absolutely, Matt. Sounds great.
Okay, so I'll do that. I'll work up a draft resolution and I'll put it out on Wired and on the MLA website for people to refer to, and then we'll meet. Let's just shoot for, we can probably, well, it's kind of a busy time of year. Let's just shoot for February. We can talk about it and then have it ready to go for the membership meeting.
I think that sounds really reasonable.
And the only other thing I want to talk about really quick is that while I'm talking about resolutions and the ALA thing, there is I was hoping to share with you guys the new proposed Article 7 to the American Library Association Library Bill of Rights that I've been working on a committee with to work on a new article for privacy. The American Library Association Bill of Rights does not currently have an article that specifically is designated for privacy. There is some wording in the library code of ethics on privacy in libraries, but there isn't an article. There's been a push over the last year or two here to kind of get that process formalized and make it more, give it more of a push to get it in the library Bill of Rights. So the committee's been working on it. We have a draft that's up right now that's being distributed to various committees. So I can't share it to the wide library audience at this point, I don't believe. But if you are on a committee like the LIDA committee, or if you're involved in the IFC for some, in some capacity, I urge you to take a look at the draft and make some comments on it if you're interested. Just a bit of history for the rest of you. What's going to happen here is that the proposed wording for a new article will be taken to the ALA Midwinter Conference here in January to be voted on by the council. Once it's approved, they will also approve a series of not justifications, the interpretations. There will be an interpretation about it as well to kind of give guidance to libraries on how they can implement this new privacy article into their policies, into their procedures at a local level. And that's really what I think we need to get some eyes on it. Once the interpretation is written up, I hope to distribute that as soon as I can to all of Montana Library Association for everyone to get a chance to look at and give me some guidance as far as the American Library Association representative to take back to council on any feedback we have as Montana Library Association. So look forward to that. Hopefully, I was hoping to be able to distribute that to you all today, but I've not had a chance. There are also two other interpretations that are being distributed right now. One on challenge materials and one on, oh gosh, off the top of my head, I can't remember. Those are still in committee right now, so I cannot share those as well. But by the next website chat where I talk about the ALA Caucus issues caucus, I will be able to share those with you a lot more. So thank you for that. And I'll pass over to John right now if you want to talk about, there's a question.
There is a question from Ann Eubank about whether we need to wait until the April conference to vote. Since appropriations begins in February, is it possible to do an electronic vote? So that's something just to throw out there.
That's not a bad idea on the resolution for the increase in funding. I don't think there's anything in our bylaws allowing resolutions to happen, votes to happen electronically. I don't think there's a lot in the bylaws right now on resolutions, so I'll need to do some research on that, Ann, and see, because you're right, it might be a little bit late to wait until April. That is pushing it. I'll look and see if I can do it sooner before then. I certainly will. No problem. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Ann. Good question.
Hi, this is John. I just wanted to update everybody on what's happening with the Government Affairs Committee. I sent out a lengthy email at the very end of November about a retreat that the Government Affairs Committee held on November 8th and 9th in Lewistown. I just wanted to recap what happened there and go over our legislative priorities for the 2019 session and open it up to any questions, and also talk about Library Legislative Night. The Government Affairs Committee met in Lewistown November 8th and 9th, and our goals for the retreat were to identify better ways for the committee to work together on behalf of the larger MLA community, how to communicate effectively and efficiently with MLA membership, identifying legislative allies and stakeholders, and to identify legislative goals for this coming session and sessions to follow. The legislative priorities for this coming session are very simple. Number one legislative priority is funding for the state library. And the second priority is a list of priorities that we will act on if needed. And those priorities include support for state aid per capita for public libraries, support for school libraries and teacher librarians, intellectual freedom. This would most likely be opposition to a bill, but it would depend upon the bill. Opposition to any bathroom bills similar to the one proposed in the 2017 session. Pornography bills, revenue enhancement, but only if it is a big picture revenue enhancement bill or benefits libraries directly. Our stand would depend on the language in the bill. And finally, broadband. We would support a broadband bill if it benefited libraries. And then looking at priorities for future sessions, the Government Affairs Committee identified several areas for us to start thinking about and working on for future sessions, not 2019, but 2021 and beyond. And those priorities include funding for libraries, which sounds broad, but items would include funding for E-rate, funding for Montana Library to Go, funding for statewide databases and other resource sharing items, funding for federations, possible update to Library Records Confidentiality Act and other Montana library laws, protection against record destruction, open education resources, which we're also trying to work on a resolution for this coming conference as well on open education resources. LSTA, Matt just talked about the resolution to increase funding for grants to states. Analysis of coal tax. What is the future of coal tax revenue in the state of Montana? Are we prepared for those changes? Local government issues, workforce training and collaboration, return of library services and Construction Act funds, and possible work with other groups on economic development, social services, mental health, homelessness, prison reentry, early childhood education. I just wanted to also go over who actually is on the committee, just so that you know when you get contacted by one of these folks that this is a legitimate request and that do as they say and as quickly as possible in most cases. Our representatives on government affairs are Anita Sheets from the James Shanley Tribal Library at Fort Peck and Poplar, Ann Eubank, Montana State University Bozeman, Connie Behe, Imagine If Libraries in Kalispell, Elizabeth Jonkel, Missoula Public Library, Missoula, Gavin Wolcher at Billings Public Library, Honor Bray at Missoula Public Library, Jennie Stapp and Tracy Cook from the State Library, Lisa Mecklenburg-Jackson from the Montana Innocence Project in Missoula, Nanette Gilbertson, who is the MLA lobbyist, she's here in Helena, Pam Benjamin from the Trails Libraries in Bozeman, Susan Gregory from Bozeman Public Library, and myself. We are looking, and Matt Beckstrom. I don't know why Matt's not on this list. Yeah. But So we will be in contact, if you haven't been contacted already, by members of the committee, introducing themselves and presenting you with sample language to contact your newly elected or existing legislators in your districts. So that was the gist of what we did at the retreat. If there are any questions or additions, I would love to hear. Jenny, was there anything you wanted to add?
Well, I just wanted to showcase this map that I hope you're seeing on the screen right now. This is a map application that Tracy helped to coordinate, and it was created by one of our GIS analysts here in Helena. This is a great tool. I think it's going to live on the Library Association website. It allows you to search for who your legislator is by your library, and then by your library district as well. So if we know we need to talk to a specific representative, we can use this tool to search for that representative and then find out who his librarian is. And then also we can search by library and find out who the representatives are by library. And we hope this will be a really effective communication tool to allow us to go back and forth between libraries and legislators and help to know how to really coordinate and direct very specific communication between libraries and their legislators. So look for this tool and look for more information about, as John said, how and when to contact your legislators. And then do we want to talk a little bit more about Library Legislative Night?
Yeah, let's do that. So the session is just 3 weeks away. So here in Helena, we are gearing up for craziness, and hopefully great contact with legislators throughout the session. But of course, the highlight of legislative session for MLA is Library Legislative Night. And this year, that evening is Tuesday, February the 5th. And that is the same day that the state library's budget is being heard. So there will be lots of activity at the Capitol that day. I think we are arranging for some training from every library, either for the day before that we will do as a webinar. So give everybody an opportunity to think about what they learned the day before, and then arriving at the Capitol to go shake hands and say hi to folks. But that evening, Tuesday, February 5th, legislative night reception will be at the State Library from 5:30 until 8 or 5 until 8?
5:30, John.
5:30 till 8 at the State Library. There will be food and drinks and ample opportunity to meet your legislators and tell them about all the good things that you're doing at your libraries.
Great. And I just can't say enough about how important that night is to showing support for legislative activities that pertain to libraries. As John said, it's really a chance to meet one-on-one with your legislators. We typically have about 2/3 of the legislators there, so it's one of the better attended legislative events during the legislative session. And the more librarians that are there, the better they understand the significance of the work that they do and the impact that it has on libraries. So we know it's a significant ask for you to come all the way to Helena, especially in February. But if there's one advocacy action that you take during the year, I would say it's coming to legislative night here in Helena.
I heard this morning from Heather Johnstone at Redbud Library that she is coming with a trustee.
Excellent.
That's quite a drive.
That's right. I encourage you guys to carpool and pick up your library friends along the way. So I just wanted to take just a couple more minutes to talk about the public awareness campaign. We've been talking about this for quite some time now. I hope you've all had a chance to visit the campaign landing page that exists on the Library Association website. I just went to mtlib.org and you can see the link right here on the homepage. There's some information about the campaign, and then this click here for resource materials for your library. This information is all live now and ready to go. We are in the process of mailing out the last of the posters, so if you haven't gotten your posters yet, I think they are in the mail now. There's still plenty of stickers available if you want those. Available from this page are all of the actual artwork. So if you want to download the artwork and embed it in your own library marketing resources, I encourage you to do so. There's logo usage guides that describe the color and the fonts and all the information you need to make use of the logos. There's a fact sheet here about the campaign. If you don't already, please do like the social media page. Tracy's going to be contacting libraries, asking libraries to make sure that they are posting photos of their libraries, from their libraries to social media, so we can like and share those via the Information Powers Facebook social media presence, so that we can really create a social media environment that's reflective of not only that campaign, but our local community libraries as well. One of the things I really want to encourage libraries to make use of is the news releases. We hope that you'll reach out to the media in your communities, talk to your local newspaper reporters, talk to local radio, local television if you have them, and encourage them to do a feel-good story. Feel-good stories are always great at the end of a year, end of a calendar year. There's some guides here with talking points to help you talk to your media about the importance of libraries and the work that you do to support your communities. So we'd love to see over the next several weeks libraries making use of these media guides to really create some buzz within local media about the importance of libraries in your communities. Again, there's a number of different talking points on different kinds of issues pertaining to economic development in the state. There's also sample letters to the editor. If your board wants to write a letter to the editor, or some of your patrons want to write letters to the editor, these are templates that can be customized and shared directly. I do want to give a shout out to Ann Eubank, who wrote a letter to the editor in the Bozeman Chronicle last week. It was a terrific letter. We'd love to see more of those around the state. You should be hearing radio spots now on any of the Northern Ag Network radio affiliates. Those are airing a couple of times a day. They'll be airing, I think, 5 days a week through February, so through the halfway point of the legislative session. And then John mentioned that there's some customizable handouts that you can share with your legislators. Those are also linked from this site, so if you want to send them a welcome notice with some information about library services, these handouts have some stats and some graphics, and you can also customize the one and just have a great little infographic that you can send off and share with your legislators to let them know about the great work you do as they're heading into the legislative session. So I hope and encourage you to share this information, to be talking about it within your communities. Take advantage of all of the great content that's here, especially some of the YouTube videos that are now available. Like them, share them, follow this channel, share these videos to your own social media channels. Let's really continue to create a lot of buzz out there ahead of the legislative session. I'm going to stop there and ask if there's any questions about the campaign or if there's just anything else anybody would like to talk about.
I haven't seen any questions, but I will say I have seen a lot of this on social media, which has been pretty exciting.
And I just want to take just a minute to acknowledge Joy Bridwell, who's joined the website chat. I hope you all saw, and congratulations, Joy, for being recognized from the American Library Association and the Love My Library acknowledgement. Many, many congratulations to you, Joy. Very well deserved. Any questions I can answer about anything we talked about, anything we didn't talk about that's on your mind?
Lots of congratulations to Joy. A question, Ann Eubank is asking about libraries ready to go, and there was another one that went by really fast. Jennifer asked, do you think it would be a good thing to give the brochure to the public because they think libraries are not being used? That's a good question.
I would say yes outside your library. You know, and you know, if there's local businesses that are willing to share that information, great. You know, it's a little bit like singing to the choir if you're sharing them only within your library, because of course those are people who are using your library. But I've heard from folks that are seeing the stickers on cars around their community and in business windows, and so I really encourage you to share that outside the four walls of your library.
I'm not seeing a lot of other questions come in. I can stop the recording, and if you have other questions, we can still talk a little bit.
Sounds good, Pam.
And the recording should be up on the Vimeo channel probably early next week. I don't think it gets up there right away, but I'll stop it now. Thanks. And thanks to everybody who came today.